Hello students, welcome to Gyanbihar School of Education. I'm Dr. Sonia Kaur Bansal and today's my topic is correlation in data analysis. Subject is methodology of educational research. So students, we are going to study about correlation today, and my learning objectives would be related to enable you all to understand the concept of correlation and how it is useful in research process. So students, first of all, let's understand what is correlation. Correlation means association, when we are correlating few things. So more precisely, it is a measure of the extent to which two variables are related. How the two variables are related to each other, how they are responding to each other, or they are not responding to each other. This is basically considered in correlation. And there are three possible results of a correlational study. Many studies have been done till now, and it is seen that any variable is related in majorly three ways. That can be positive correlation, a negative correlation, or there can be no correlation or zero correlation. All right, student. So this is how correlation is explained now. So correlation is a linear association between two random variables. We have chosen the variables randomly and we are just calculating how beautifully they are correlating with each other. So correlation analysis show us how to determine both the nature and strength of relationship between two variables. When variables are dependent on time, correlation is applied. So students, so understand that correlation is a very major and important thing which is actually uh, involved in research process, because many times we have to see the correlation between the variables to come to the a certain conclusion. If we are not aware how the correlation is working, then many things we might miss in our research findings. So it is very important. A zero correlation indicates that there is no relationship between the variables. It means two variables are not associated with each other in any way. And a correlation of -1 indicates a perfect negative correlation. So negative correlation is something that when one variable is not at all related to another. And it is perfectly negative. When one is going up, another is going down. So this is called negative correlation. Then thirdly, a correlation of +1 indicates a perfect positive correlation. That means if one variable is increasing or decreasing in an experiment, the another variable is also increasing or decreasing in the same way. So the +1 perfect positive correlation is found in that way. So now just understand positive, negative and zero correlation in a more elaborative way. How it is. So a positive correlation is a relationship between two variables in which both variables move in the same direction. As I have told you that when two variables are here and both are actually moving in the same direction, increasing or decreasing. So it is found that the variables are positively correlated because they are increasing or decreasing in the same direction. Therefore, one variable increases as the other variable increases, or one variable decreases while the other decreases. I'm giving you one example for this, students, like summer season and consumption of ice creams. So what you are going to do, you will find a positive correlation. As the summer will come into full-fledgedly, the consumption of ice cream will be more and more. So in this way, there are two variables positively correlated. Another example of positive correlation would be height and weight. Taller people tend to be heavier. So this is also a positive correlation. Now students, let's talk about negative correlation. So negative correlation is a relationship between two variables in which an increase in one variable is associated with a decrease in the other. You have two variables, but they both are not increasing in the same direction. One might increase and other might decrease, and so vice versa. So an example of negative correlation would be height above sea level and temperature. As you climb the mountain, increase in height, it gets colder, decrease in temperature. So height and temperature both are negatively correlated. When we specifically talking about mountain climbing, then comes here a zero correlation. Zero correlation is something, students, that there is no association between two variables. And we are not at all concerned with the next variable, what we have chosen. So there is no relationship, no association between two variables. So that is called zero relationship. For example, there is no relationship between the amount of tea drunk and level of intelligence. How much intelligent you are, it is not actually related how many cups you are having of your tea. So zero correlation is there. So I hope you have understood how what is positive and what is negative and what is zero correlation. Now students, there are three types of correlation which we have just understanding in a more elaborative way, like types, type 1, type 2, type 3. So what we have understood just now. So zero, positive and negative. Then type 1 is including this: positive, negative, no correlation and perfect. Students, if two related variables are such that when one increases, decreases or decreases, both conditions can be applied randomly. The other also increases or decreases. If two variables are such that when one increases, the other decreases. If both the variables are independent. So this is how the relation is established, and then correlation is established. Then type 2 is related to linear and non-linear. When plotted on a graph, it tends to be a perfect line. It is linear. But when plotted on a graph, it is not a straight line. So it is non-linear. So this is called type 2 type of correlation. You can see the examples how it is done. When the dots are in the same direction, correlation is there. They are in the same direction, linear correlation is there. But non-linear, you can see dots are not in the same direction. They are scattered here and there. So non-linear correlation is found in type 2 correlation. Okay, students, I think you are watching it. Correlation 1.0, 1.0, and then correlation 0 in third diagram, third graph. Correlation 0.8, then correlation 0.2, correlation 0, where nothing is actually correlated. Now here is type 3 correlation. Type 3 correlation is associated with simple correlation, multiple correlation, or partial correlation. So two independent and one dependent variable are actually seen in simple correlation. One dependent and one more than one independent variables. So one dependent and more than one independent variables, then multiple correlation is there. But in partial, one dependent variable and more than one independent variable, but only one independent variable is considered and other independent variables are considered constant. So this is how type 3 correlation is described in simple, multiple and partial ways. Now students, let's have a look on the characteristics of correlational research. It is very important for a good research researcher, investigator to establish a correlation in the variables. So, correlational research has three main characteristics, which they are: it can be non experimental, backward looking, or dynamic. So, what is non experimental? Let's have a look on this. So, correlational study is non experimental. It what does it mean? That there is no experiment? And it means also that teachers need not manipulate variables with a scientific methodology to either agree or disagree with a hypothesis. So we do not need to go scientifically in a methodological purpose when we are talking about non-experimental method. The researcher only measures and observes the relationship between the variables without alerting them or subjecting them to external conditioning. So, this is how variables are measured by the observation. And you are not alerting it. You are not making any changes in the variables. They will be as it is. You are not going to do any experiment on it. You are not reducing yourself or you are not increasing yourself. So you don't have any control. You are just observing and you are manipulating the results. But you have to be very clear that whatever you have seen, whatever you have observed, you are drawing out the results in a proper way. So this is non-experimental characteristic, which is related to correlational research. Then next characteristic is related to backward looking. Correlational research only looks at historical data, how the two variables were related to each other, and observes event in the past. Researchers use it to measure and spot historical patterns between two variables. A correlation study may show a positive relationship between two variables, but this can change in the future. So this is how backward looking is here. So it deals with historical data and observes in the past. And researchers use to measure and spot historical patterns, how the variables were earlier related. This is mainly discussed in this. Then dynamic. The patterns between two variables from correlational research are never constant. They are not stagnant at one place. They are dynamic always. And they are always changing. Two variables having a negative correlation in the past can have a positive correlationship in the future due to various factors. So it is not like that once it is not correlated, it will not be correlated for forever. So correlational research is very important research. So when as a researcher or an investigator, you are researching something from the correlational point of view, you must remember this point very clearly, that variables are dynamic. They change their nature according to the changed situations. Okay, students, so I hope you have understood the three main characteristics. Now, students, let's study methods of studying correlation. In what ways correlation is studied? So mainly correlation is studied according to three methods. First is scatter diagram method. Second, Carl Pearson coefficient correlation of method. Then thirdly, Spearman's rank correlation method. So these are the three main important prominent methods by which the researchers sees the correlation between the two variables or more than that. Maybe it is simple, multiple or partial correlation. So let's see them one by one and how it works in our research. So first of all, scatter diagram method. Students, a correlation can be expressed visually. This is done by drawing a scattergram, also known as scatter plot, scatter graph. scatter chart, or scatter diagram. So what is a scatter diagram? Or what is a scattergram? Scattergram is a graphical display that shows the relationship of associations between two numerical variables or covariables, which are represented as points for each pair of score. I just repeat it. A scattergram is a graphical display. You have to show the results on graph, and it shows the relationship or association between two numerical variables or covariables. Numerical variables must be there, which are represented as points or dots for each pair of score. So a scatter graph indicates the strength and direction of the correlation between the covariables. How much strong the correlation is there. Your scatter diagram will speak about it. When you draw a scattergram, students, it doesn't matter which variable goes on the x-axis and which goes on the y-axis. So it is not related anymore. Scattergram, any variable can go to x, or any variable can go to y-axis. So remember, students, that in correlation we are always dealing with paired scores. So the values of the two variables taken together will be used to make the diagram and decide which variable goes on which axis, and then simply put a cross at the point where the two values coincide. So this is how scatter diagram is drawn and where association is shown. Now, data collection in correlational research. How do we collect the data? It is very important to know about it. So the distinctive feature of correlation research is that the researcher can't manipulate either of the variable involved. It doesn't matter at all how and where the variables are measured. So a researcher could observe participants in a closed environment or a public setting. So this is how data is collected in correlational research. Now, researchers use three data collection methods, students, to collect information in correlational research. So first is naturalistic observation. Naturalistic observation is a way of data collection in which people's behavior is observed, as its name is suggesting to you, student, natural, in a very natural setting, natural environment, and in which actually typically they exist. We want to observe that phenomena. We're not going to make any changes. So this is how naturalistic observation is done. And this method is a type of field research. And it could mean a researcher might be observing people in a grocery store, at the cinema, playground, or any educational institution, or any similar places. So this is how the researcher has to go to the field to observe the data, how well it is correlated or not. Researchers who are usually involved in this type of data collection make observations as unobtrusively as possible, so that the participants involved in this study, they are not aware that they are being observed. Else they might get deviated, they might get distracted, and their natural behavior will not come out. So the researcher must actually let them to be their natural self. All right, student. So this is the first thing that I wanted to discuss with you, that naturalistic observation is an important observation for correlational studies. So ethically, this method is acceptable if the participants remain anonymous and if the study is conducted in a public setting, a place where people would not normally expect complete privacy. So this is how the data is collected in natural settings, and the observant is not known about it, or the variable is not known about it. So as mentioned previously, Taking an example of the grocery store where people can be observed while collecting an item from the aisle and putting in the shopping bags. How do they shop? How do they bargain? How do they pay their bills? By what mode? Online, offline, net banking, or in what way? How do they carry their things? How do they communicate? There are so many factors which can be researched. So it must be in the natural surroundings only. So this is ethically acceptable, and that is the reason most researchers choose public settings for recording their observations. This data collection method could be both qualitative and quantitative. The observation can be done in the form of numbers or as well as in the statements. So both type of data can be collected. Now students, let's have an example of what are the advantages and disadvantages of this type of data collection, which is done in naturalistic observation method. So advantages lead us to that it can inspire ideas for future research. How we can do the research in the same with the same variable in future also. An option if lab experiment not available. This is the best option. Every time you cannot do an experiment in the research, but lab experiment is not possible, so observation is possible. So view variables in natural setting is something that is actually giving actual data to the researcher, and this is more of importance. Then there are definitely some disadvantages of this type of research. So it can be time consuming and expensive too when the researcher has to go to the field, and the researcher has to take care of his whereabouts, his staying, his fooding. So when constantly we are observing something, some people or some objects, so it takes time, and it might cost very expensive to the researcher also. Then nextly, extraneous variables can't be controlled. In laboratories, when we do the experiments, we can control the extraneous variables. We can control them. But in natural setting, you cannot control what the other factors are influencing your research variables. So no scientific control of variables is found. Subjects might behave differently if aware of being observed. So there is a lot of chance that your subject, your variable, might get to know that they are being observed. In that case, your natural data, your accurate data will not be available. And in that condition, your whole efforts may go in vain, what you have done till now. Now next is the survey method. Survey method is very popular method in research. And surveys and questionnaires are some of the most common methods used for psychological research. Survey means you're finding something by surveying a group of people or a particular sample or population. You are doing surveys, and surveys can be done through questionnaires. So this is very common and very important method. So the survey method involves having a random sample of participants. You are actually not covering purposive sampling here. In some type of researches, there may be purposive sampling, but as far as it is concerned with real surveys, so random sampling is connected of participants complete a survey. So test or questionnaire related to the variables of interest. The random sampling is vital to the generalizability of the survey's results. Only then it would be possible. But it has also its advantages and disadvantages. So in advantages, we can count that survey methods are cheap, easy, and fast. They are easily actually done and very cheap to prepare the questionnaire, and easy also. Can collect large amount of data in short amount of time. and they are flexible also. If your respondent is not ready to give the data right now, then you can shift it to sometime some other day. Now, disadvantages. Results can be affected by poor survey questions. If your questions are not proper, you cannot be sure that your survey is going to be perfect. Results can be affected by unrepresentative sample. So, if you have proper representation of your population or sample, then your results can be uh, got in proper accurate terms. Outcomes can be affected by participants also. So these are the advantages and disadvantages of survey method. Now, third very important type of method of collecting data is archival data. So archival is data that another approach to correlation is the use of archival data. Now students, let's understand that archival information is the data that has been previously collected by doing similar kinds of research, but it was not used by that time, or maybe used in some partial way. Archival data is usually made available through primary researches. Those who are doing primary researches using questionnaires, surveys, and they are getting the primary data. So, in contrast to naturalistic observation, the information collected through archive data can be quite straightforward. You can easily have your data if it is available. For example, counting the number of people named Richard in the various states of America based on social security records is quite straightforward, that you can easily find the number of people who named Richard. So this is archival data. Now it has also its advantages and disadvantages. Advantages are that the large amount of data is easily available in archived form, and it can be less expensive as you don't have to collect your data right now, and it is easily available to you. Then thirdly, researchers cannot change participant behavior. Disadvantages can be unreliable. Information might be missing. No control over data collection methods. So these are some disadvantages also. Now see students, correlation, linear relationships. Strong relationship equals to good linear fit. How it is seen in the diagram you can see. Just see the graph. There are two drugs. Drug A, doses are given in mg, milligrams. And symptom index is also given. And drug B. So how it is done? Very good fit is seen in drug A case, and moderate fit is seen in drug B case. So point clustered closely around a line. There is a imaginative line, and if the points are clustered around that line, show a strong correlation. The line is a good predictor, good fit with the data. The more spread out the points, the weaker the correlation. And the less good the fit. The line is a regression line, y equals to bx plus a. So this is how linear relationship is found. So just understand students, there is an imaginative line and your dots are clustered around that line, then it will be a very good fit. But if they are somehow, you are not finding out clustered it around the line and they are just somehow spread in points, then it will be weaker correlation. Okay students, so this is how the correlation is established through graphs. Now, coefficient of correlation. So what is coefficient of correlation? This is the measurement area. As we give measure, like water is measured in liters, and bananas are measured in kilos. So correlation coefficient is also there, a measure of the strength of the linear relationship between two variables that is defined in terms of covariance of the variables divided by their standard deviations. So represented by r, small r. This is the coefficient of correlation, and r lies between +1 to -1. This is magnitude and direction also. So -1 less than r less than +1. The plus and minus signs are used for positive linear correlations and negative linear correlations respectively. When we are using minus, that means the correlation is going on in a negative way. But when we are using plus, so it means positive correlation is there. So this is the formula seen on your screen, students. You can have a look. And it is a shared variability of x and y variables on the top, individual variability of x and y variables on the bottom. So this is the formula of how the correlation is calculated. Now interpreting correlation coefficient R. There are three types of correlation I have told you: strong correlation, moderate correlation, and weak correlation. So when the strong correlation is found, you generally see that R is greater than 0.70 or R is less than -0.70. So when 0.70 is coefficient, then it is supposed to be strong correlation. Moderate correlation is supposed to be when R is between 0.30 and 0.70, maybe plus or minus accordingly. Or R is between -0.30 minus 0.70. But there is weak correlation type also, and when the R is between 0 and 0.30 or is between 0 and -30, 0.30. So weak correlation is found. So how you are going to interpret your correlation coefficient? It is based upon that. So understood, students? Strong correlation, moderate correlation, and weak correlation. Strong correlation stands till to up to 0.70. Moderate stands with 0.30 to 0.70. And weak correlation stands for 0.30 to 0. All right. Now, coefficient of determination. How you are going to determine the coefficient, this is very important. So let's understand it. Coefficient of determination lies between 0 to 1. Number 1, you have to remember. It lies between 0 to 1. Then it is represented by R square. R square, that is coefficient. So the coefficient of determination is a measure of how well the regression line represents the data. If the regression line passes exactly through every point on the scattered plot, it would be able to explain all the variations. So the further line is away from the points, the less it is able to explain. So R square is useful because it gives the proportion of the variance of one variable that is predictable from the other variable. It is a measure that allows us to determine how certain one can be in making predictions from a certain model or graph. So students, the coefficient of determination is the ratio of explained variation of the total variation. The coefficient of determination is such that 0 is less than R square and R square is less than 1, and denotes the strength of the linear association between x and y. So strength is taken out in determination of coefficient. Then next thing is the coefficient of determination represents the percent of data that is the closest to the line of best fit. For example, students, if R equals to 0.922, then R squared is 0.850. So, which means that 85% of the total variation in Y can be explained by the linear relationship between X and Y as directed by the regression equation. So, the other 15% of total variation in Y remains unexplained. So, this is how it is being explained. So, I hope you are understanding, students. So, this is how coefficient of determination is found. Now, next is, students, about Spearman rank coefficient. So, Spearman's rank coefficient is a method to determine correlation between the variables when the data is not available in numerical form. The first thing is there, it is not available in numerical form, and as an alternative, the method of rank correlation is used. So therefore, when the values of the two variables are converted into their ranks, and therefrom the correlation is obtained, the correlation is known as rank correlation. So this is the Spearman's rank correlation method. Spearman's rank correlation coefficient can be calculated when. So it is indicating P. P is for Spearman's rank correlation indicator. So we use Spearman's rank correlation when actual ranks are given. Ranks are not given, but grades are given, but not repeated. So ranks are not given, the grades and given repeated. So P equals to 1 minus 6 summation D square I and n square minus 1. This is the formula of calculating or computation of rank correlation through Spearman's rank correlation method. Now, students, let's have a look on MCQs which I have set for you in general correlation purpose. So, statement based on the systematic collection of data are. All of you are requested to just pay attention on these MCQs as they are very important. So, statements based on the systematic collection of data are empirical, dialectic, empathetic, false. So, the correct answer is empirical. Next question deals with the goal of correlational research is to assess the causal impact of one variable on another, create a snapshot of what's happening, assess relationship between variables, or all of the above. So the correct answer is assess the relationship between variables. Next question, students. A study of the feeding behavior of a group of wild monkeys in India would be an example of a survey, a naturalistic observation, a correlation, an experiment. So when definitely you are studying a feeding behavior of a group of wild monkeys in India, this is naturalistic observation. So correct answer is B. You are not disturbing the setting, and you are actually observing the monkeys in their natural settings. If income and happiness are positively correlated, then a person with a low income would be predicted to be more depressed. A person with low income would be predicted to be not depressed at all, less depressed than a person with a high income, more depressed than a person with a high income. Cannot make a prediction from correlational data. So the correct answer is more depressed than a person with a high income. All right, students. Now, descriptive statistics aims to explain, confuse, complicate, summarize. So the correct answer is summarize. Then next question is related to in a dash experiment. Neither the researcher nor the participants know which condition participants are in. Blind, double mind, double blind, random, confounded. So the correct answer is double blind. Next question is related to a researcher is interested in the impact of anxiety on performance in order to manipulate anxiety. They have some subjects eat plant chips while others eat barbecue flavored chips. The most obvious problem with this experiment is a lack of statistical validity, empirical validity, eternal validity, construct validity. So the correct answer is we are going to see the construct validity in this. A strength of correlational design is that they can demonstrate causation, do not require ethics board approval, can be used with variables which cannot be manipulated by a researcher, or are more intrusive than experimental design. So correct answer is can be used with variables which cannot be manipulated by researcher. So this is the correct answer. Now students, these are some references for your study purpose, and I hope you are going to study them in a more elaborative way and you will really enjoy that studying. So today we have seen a lot about correlation. And students, just remember that correlation is a wonderful statistical treatment which we find in research problems. And we have seen what is correlation, and we have seen that correlation means association. More precisely, is a measure of the extent to which two variables are related. How the two variables are relating with each other, how they are establishing the development, association, relationship. This is basically seen in correlation. So there are possible results of correlation study, which I have told you that correlation is majorly found in three ways: positive correlation, negative correlation, and zero correlation. And I told you that positive correlationship is a relationship between two variables in which both variables move in the same direction. Therefore, one variable, if it is decreasing or increasing, the other variables decreases or increases in the same pace. So an example I was also quoted about height and weight in this. Then a negative correlation was also established. It's a relationship between two variables in which an increase in one variable is associated with a decrease in another. So negatively they are actually related to each other. Then we talked about zero correlation, when there is no relationship at all in two variables or more variables. One is decreasing or increasing, the other is not affected. There is no correlation. I gave you the example of drinking cups of tea and your intelligence. So this is how we explained, and then we have also seen about types of correlation: type 1, type 2, and type 3. And in type 1, we have seen positive, negative, no correlation, and perfect correlation. And in type 2, we have seen linear correlation, non-linear correlation. So when we are plotting on a graph and everything is straight in a perfect line, dots are found in perfect line, then it is a linear correlation. But when the dots are not in perfect line and they are spread here and there, so they are not making a straight and perfect line. So it is kind of non-linear correlation. I showed you some graphs also for the examples. Then next, type 3, I told you about simple and multiple and partial type of correlation. Simple correlation was found in type 3, that when independent and one dependent variable you chose to see. But in multiple correlation, when one dependent and more than one independent variables are there, maybe there are two more independent variables. So, but partial, one dependent variable and more than one independent variable, but only one independent variable is considered and other independent variables are considered constant. They are not changing. Okay, students. Then we have also seen about the characteristics of correlational research, and they were mainly related to non-experimental research, correlational research, backward looking correlational research. In non-experimental research, we are not going to do any experiment which is actually related to manipulative variables with a scientific methodology. So we are not going to do that. So this is called non-experimental research. In backward-looking correlational research, only look back at historical data and observes event in the past. So researchers use it to measure and spot historical patterns between two variables. And then third type we have seen characteristics dynamic, the pattern between two variables from correlational research are never constant and are always changing. So two variables having a negative correlation in the past can have positive correlation relationship in the future due to various factors. And because I have told you that they are dynamic in nature, they are not constant. All right, students. So I hope you are understanding well. Then I have told you about the methods of studying correlation, how it is studied, scatter diagram method, Pearson coefficient method, Spearman's rank correlation method. Then in scatter diagram, we have understood that it can be expressed visually through graphs. And scatter diagram is also called scatter plot, scatter graph, scatter chart, scatter diagram. So scatter diagram is something that is graphically displaying your numerical data of two variables which are represented in the forms of points or dots for each pair of score. So it indicates how the strength and direction of the correlation between two covariables. Then we have also seen about data collection in correlational research, how it is collected. So data collection was mainly done in naturalistic observation, where we are not going to change the settings and everything is done in that way. Then we have also seen how the advantages and disadvantages were related to naturalistic observation. Then we have seen survey method. Survey method is the most common method used for psychological type of research, and it also involves random sampling. Then we have seen the advantages and disadvantages, and we have also seen the third type of archival data. So it was related to another approach to correlational data, where everything is done earlier, previously, and you are just watching them and using in your research, because similar kind of research was done earlier and now you are using the data. We have also discussed advantages and disadvantages. Correlational linear relationship was also discussed, and coefficient of correlation was also told to you, students, representing by R, and R lies between +1 to -1. Okay, we have seen that +1 and -1 stands for positive and negative correlation. We have seen the formula also, and interpretation of correlation coefficient is done if the R is greater than 0.70, then it is a strong correlation. But if the R is between 0.30, it can be minus or positive in both ways, or 0.70 in between, then it is moderate type of correlation. But if the R is between 0 to 0.30, maybe minus or plus, then it is called weak correlation. So this is all what we have discussed, students, and I really hope that you have understood well the correlational study, how it is done and how the data is collected with this method. So students, see you in the next class. Till then, see you. Take care, stay safe, and keep learning.